A psychotic neighborhood president buries a disabled 12-year-old girl alive for violating housing rules. What she doesn't know is that the girl's father is an FBI agent specializing in kidnapping cases. When he discovers the empty wheelchair and threatening note, her perfect world of control begins to crumble into a nightmare of justice and revenge. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The screaming started at 3:47 a.m. I bolted upright in bed, my FBI training kicking in before my brain fully processed what was happening. Sarah. My daughter. The sound coming from her room wasn't just a nightmare, it was pure, primal terror. I reached her room in seconds, my heart hammering against my ribs. What I found there would haunt me for the rest of my life. Sarah was gone. Her wheelchair sat empty by the window, and the screen had been torn open from the outside. Muddy footprints tracked across her floor. On her pillow lay a single note, written in crude handwriting: "Violators will be dealt with. HOA regulations must be followed. Consider this your final warning." My blood turned to ice. Karen Mitchell. Our HOA president. The woman who had made our lives hell for the past 6 months. We had moved to Meadowbrook Estates thinking it would be perfect for Sarah. The neighborhood was quiet, the streets were smooth for her wheelchair, and the single-story ranch we bought had been modified for accessibility. After the car accident that had taken my wife and left my 12-year-old daughter paralyzed from the waist down, I wanted to give her every chance at a normal life. Karen Mitchell showed up on our doorstep the very first day. She was a tall woman in her mid-50s, with severely pulled-back blonde hair and a permanent sneer that she probably thought was a smile. Her eyes were cold and calculating, the kind that saw people as problems to be solved rather than human beings. "Welcome to Meadowbrook Estates," she said, not waiting for an invitation before stepping inside. "I'm Karen Mitchell, HOA president. I need to inform you of some violations I've already noticed." I blinked, still holding a moving box. "Violations? We just got here 2 hours ago. Your moving truck is parked in a non-designated area. That's a $50 fine. Your grass is already a 1/4 inch above regulation height. Another $50. And I see you have a wheelchair ramp being installed." She pointed at the workers outside. "That wasn't approved by the Architectural Review Committee. That's a $500 fine, and you'll need to remove it immediately." My jaw dropped. My daughter is disabled. She needs that ramp to get in and out of the house. "Then you should have purchased a property that already met your needs," Karen said coolly. "The HOA bylaws clearly state that all exterior modifications must be approved in advance. No exceptions. My daughter is protected under the Fair Housing Act," I said, fighting to keep my voice level. "You cannot prevent me from making reasonable accommodations for her disability." Karen's smile turned into something sharp and ugly. "We'll see what our lawyers say about that, Mr. Crawford. Welcome to the neighborhood." She turned and walked out, leaving me standing there with fury boiling in my chest. That was just the beginning. Over the next 6 months, Karen Mitchell made it her personal mission to destroy us. She issued fines for everything imaginable. Our garbage cans were 2 inches outside the designated zone. $50. Sarah's medical equipment van was parked in our driveway overnight. $100. The flowers I planted to cheer up Sarah were non-approved species. $75. But the fines were nothing compared to the rest. Karen convinced our neighbors to shun us. She spread rumors that Sarah's disability was contagious, that we were running an illegal medical facility, that I was some kind of criminal. People who had been friendly at first stopped waving. Parents pulled their children away when Sarah wheeled past. She called Child Protective Services 3 times, claiming I was neglecting Sarah. Each time, the investigators found nothing wrong, but each visit traumatized my daughter more. She tried to have our ramp removed by the county, claiming it was a safety hazard. When that failed, she poured oil on it one night, causing Sarah to slip and nearly break her arm. I reported everything to the police. But Karen's husband was a retired police captain, and her brother was a judge. My complaints went nowhere. The local officers treated me like I was the problem, like I was some troublemaker who couldn't follow simple rules. "Why don't you just move?" one officer suggested. "Sometimes it's easier to just find a new place than fight City Hall." But I couldn't move. Sarah had finally started making progress. Her physical therapist was local. Her counselor was helping her cope with losing her mother. Moving would destroy all that progress. So I stayed and documented everything. Every fine, every threat, every act of harassment. I built a file, knowing that eventually, I would need it. I just didn't know how soon. The note in Sarah's room told me everything I needed to know. Karen had finally gone too far. She hadn't just harassed us. She had kidnapped my daughter. I immediately called 911, but even as I did, I knew how this would play. Karen's connections would slow everything down. Every minute of delay could mean Sarah's life. I couldn't wait for local police. I needed to find my daughter now. I ran to my home office and pulled out my FBI credentials and equipment. Most people in the neighborhood had no idea what I did for a living. I'd been intentionally vague, saying I worked for the government. After 15 years with the FBI, specializing in kidnapping and missing persons cases, I had skills that Karen Mitchell couldn't imagine. I also had resources. Within minutes, I had my team on the phone. Tech specialists, analysts, field agents. They owed me favors, and I was calling them all in. "I need cell tower data for Karen Mitchell," I told my tech specialist, Marcus. "And I need it 5 minutes ago." "Jim, you know I can't just. My daughter has been kidnapped, Marcus. She's 12 years old and paralyzed. Every second counts." There was a pause. "Then, give me 10 minutes. While I waited, I searched Sarah's room more carefully. The muddy footprints were fresh. I took photos, noting the tread pattern. Work boots, size 10, with a distinctive wear pattern on the left heel. The window screen had been cut with a sharp blade, probably a utility knife. There were fabric fibers caught on the frame, burlap, maybe from a sack. My phone rang. "Marcus." Karen's cell phone pinged off a tower near the old construction site on Bixby Road 45 minutes ago. Since then, nothing. She's either turned it off or destroyed it. Bixby Road. There was a housing development out there that had been abandoned when the developer went bankrupt. Miles of empty homes in various stages of construction, surrounded by dirt mounds and excavation pits. Perfect place to hide someone. Or bury them. The thought made my blood run cold, but I couldn't afford to panic. Sarah needed me focused. I grabbed my service weapon, my tactical vest, and my flashlight. I was heading for the door when the local police finally arrived. Officer Benton, the same cop who'd dismissed my previous complaints, stood on my doorstep. "Mr. Crawford, we got a call about a possible runaway." "She didn't run away," I snapped. "She was kidnapped. She's in a wheelchair, for God's sake. How would she run?" Benton shifted uncomfortably. "Well, the HOA president, Mrs. Mitchell, she called us too. Said you've been making threats against her and she's worried you might be having some kind of breakdown." I didn't have time for this. I pulled out my FBI credentials and shoved them in his face. "Special Agent James Crawford, FBI. My daughter has been abducted by Karen Mitchell. I have evidence placing Mitchell at the Bixby Road construction site. I'm going there now. You can either help me or stay out of my way, but if anything happens to my daughter because you slowed me down, I will make sure everyone knows you protected her kidnapper." Benton's face went pale. "FBI? You're FBI?" "Yes. And you've been ignoring my complaints about harassment and assault for 6 months. We'll discuss that later. Right now, I need units at the Bixby Road site immediately. To his credit, Benton got on his radio fast. But I didn't wait. I was already running to my car. The construction site was a maze of half-built houses and torn-up earth. My headlights cut through the darkness as I drove slowly down the main road, searching for any sign of Karen's car. Nothing. I parked and got out, using my tactical flashlight to search the area. The beam swept over piles of lumber, concrete forms, abandoned equipment. And then I saw it, fresh tire tracks leading off the main road toward the excavation area. I followed them on foot, my weapon drawn. The tracks led to a clearing surrounded by large mounds of dirt. In the center was a freshly disturbed patch of earth, about 6 feet long and 3 feet wide. My heart stopped. No. Please, God, no. I ran to the mound and dropped to my knees, digging frantically with my hands. The dirt was loose, recently piled. About 2 feet down, my fingers hit something hard. Plastic. A tarp. I dug faster, yanking the tarp aside. Underneath was a large plastic storage container, the kind used for moving. It had air holes drilled in the top. And from inside came a weak, muffled sound. Sarah. I screamed, ripping at the container's lid. It was locked with a padlock. I didn't hesitate. I stood up, aimed my weapon at the lock, and fired. The lock shattered. I yanked the lid open. Sarah lay inside, her small body curled into a ball. Her face was streaked with tears and dirt. Her eyes were wide with terror. Duct tape covered her mouth, and her hands were zip-tied behind her back. "It's okay, baby," I said, my voice breaking as I lifted her out. "Daddy's got you. You're safe now." I pulled the tape from her mouth as gently as I could and cut the zip ties. She immediately threw her arms around my neck, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. "I couldn't breathe right," she gasped. "I couldn't move. I thought I was going to die down there, Daddy. I thought I was going to die." "You're safe now," I repeated, holding her tight. "I've got you. You're safe." Behind me, I heard a car door slam. I turned, keeping Sarah behind me, my weapon coming up. Karen Mitchell stood there, illuminated by my flashlight. She held a shovel in her hands. Her face was twisted into something ugly and triumphant. "She violated the rules one too many times," Karen said calmly, as if we were discussing a parking ticket. "I told you there would be consequences. That wheelchair left track marks on the sidewalk. She had toys in the front yard. You people refused to follow the simplest rules. You buried my daughter alive," I said, my voice deadly calm. "She's a child." "She's a violation," Karen spat. "And so are you. This neighborhood was perfect before you came. Everyone followed the rules. Everyone knew their place. But you had to bring your problems here. Your disabled daughter. Your attitude. You refused to just fall in line. She's 12 years old. I don't care if she's 2. Karen shrieked, her composure finally cracking. "The rules apply to everyone. That's what makes a community work. Order. Structure. People like you think you're special, that the rules don't apply to you because you have some sob story." Freeze. Police. Officer Benton and 3 other officers came running in, their weapons drawn. They'd heard everything. Karen's confession had been witnessed by 4 police officers. Karen's face went pale as she finally realized what she'd done. I didn't mean, it was just to teach them a lesson." "Drop the shovel and get on the ground," Benton ordered. "Now." Karen dropped the shovel, but she didn't get down. Instead, she turned to me, her face contorted with hatred. "This is your fault. All of it. If you had just followed the rules." "If I had followed your rules," I interrupted, my voice cold, my daughter would be dead in that box right now. And you would have gone home, had a glass of wine, and slept peacefully. Karen had no answer for that. The officers moved in and cuffed her. As they led her away, she was still screaming about bylaws and regulations and order. I didn't care. I held Sarah close, feeling her heartbeat against my chest, and nothing else mattered. Sarah spent 3 days in the hospital. Physically, she was bruised and dehydrated but otherwise unharmed. Psychologically, the damage was severe. She had nightmares every night. She couldn't stand to be in enclosed spaces. Even her bedroom felt too small now. But she was alive. That was what mattered. Karen Mitchell was charged with kidnapping, child endangerment, attempted murder, and a dozen other crimes. Her husband tried to use his connections to make the charges go away, but they couldn't fight the evidence. There were witnesses. There was her confession. There was the box she'd buried my daughter in, with Sarah's fingerprints and DNA all over the inside. The trial was swift. Karen showed no remorse. She actually stood in court and argued that she'd been trying to teach us a lesson about following rules. Her lawyer tried to argue temporary insanity, but the prosecution showed how she'd planned everything, buying the storage container, scouting the location, waiting until I would be asleep. This was premeditated. This was cold-blooded. This was a woman who had been so consumed by her need for control that she'd convinced herself that burying a child alive was a reasonable response to perceived rule violations. The jury deliberated for 40 minutes. Guilty on all counts. The judge gave her 30 years without parole. As the bailiffs led her away, she looked at me one last time. The hatred in her eyes was still there, burning as bright as ever. This neighborhood was perfect before you came, she hissed. No, I said quietly. It was a prison. And you were the warden. We moved out of Meadowbrook Estates 2 weeks after the trial ended. I couldn't have Sarah living in that house, in that neighborhood, with those memories. We found a small house in the next county, on a quiet street with no HOA. The neighbors welcomed us immediately. They helped us move in. They brought casseroles and cookies. When they saw Sarah's wheelchair, they asked if there was anything they could do to help, not how soon we could leave. It was what a real community should be. Sarah started therapy, physical and psychological. Her therapist, Dr. Martinez, specialized in childhood trauma. The nightmares slowly decreased. The fear of enclosed spaces began to fade. Sarah started smiling again, laughing again. One evening, about 3 months after we moved, Sarah wheeled herself out to the back porch where I was sitting. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Daddy," she said softly. "Yeah, baby. I had a dream last night. But it wasn't a nightmare. I dreamed about Mom." My throat tightened. We didn't talk about my wife much. It was too painful for both of us. "What did she say?" I asked. "She said she was proud of me. For being strong. For fighting." Sarah looked up at me, tears glistening in her eyes. "And she said she was proud of you. For saving me." I pulled Sarah close, burying my face in her hair so she wouldn't see my tears. "I'll always save you, baby. Always. No matter what." "I know, Daddy." We sat there together as the sun went down, 2 people who had been through hell and somehow made it back. We were scarred. We were changed. But we were together, and we were healing. But the story didn't end with Karen's conviction. Once people learned what had happened, everything Karen had built came crashing down. The HOA at Meadowbrook Estates was dissolved after 17 families filed a class action lawsuit. They'd all been victims of Karen's harassment in one way or another. The total damages awarded exceeded $2 million. Karen's husband divorced her while she was awaiting trial. He claimed he'd had no idea what she was doing, though I suspected he'd known more than he admitted. Still, he lost his pension and his reputation. The police department he'd worked for launched an internal investigation into whether he'd used his influence to shield his wife. Karen's brother, the judge, was investigated by the Judicial Ethics Board. They found he'd dismissed multiple complaints against Karen over the years without proper cause. He was censured and eventually resigned. The local police department underwent a complete overhaul after a federal investigation revealed a pattern of ignored complaints, especially those involving Karen. Officer Benton, to his credit, cooperated fully. He admitted he'd been wrong to dismiss my concerns and had let personal relationships cloud his judgment. He wasn't fired, but he was demoted and required to undergo additional training. Every single fine Karen had ever issued was reviewed. The vast majority were found to be either excessive or completely without merit. Hundreds of families got refunds. The neighborhood that Karen had controlled with an iron fist for years was finally free. And from what I heard, it actually became the community it should have been, neighbors helping neighbors, people looking out for each other, not because rules forced them to, but because they wanted to. 2 years after the incident, Sarah asked me if she could start a support group for kids with disabilities who'd faced bullying or harassment. I was incredibly proud. My daughter, who'd been buried alive at 12 years old, who'd faced months of trauma and recovery, wanted to help others. We started the group in our living room. 3 kids came the first week. Within 6 months, we had 25. Sarah led the meetings, talking openly about her experiences, showing other kids that trauma didn't have to define them. She also started speaking at schools about disability awareness and the importance of standing up to bullies. The first time she gave a presentation, I sat in the back of the auditorium and watched my daughter, now 14, confident, strong, tell a room full of high schoolers about the night she was kidnapped. I was terrified, she told them. I thought I was going to die in that box. But I also made myself a promise. If I survived, I would never let anyone make me feel small again. I would never let anyone tell me I didn't belong. I would never let anyone's cruelty break me. The room was dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Bullies want power, Sarah continued. They want control. They want you to be afraid. But here's the thing, they're actually the scared ones. They're so afraid of anything different, anything they can't control, that they lash out. Karen Mitchell was scared. Scared that a disabled girl living in her neighborhood somehow threatened her perfect little world. Sarah wheeled herself to the front of the stage, making eye contact with students throughout the audience. So if you're being bullied, here's what I want you to know. You are not the problem. Your disability, your race, your religion, your identity, none of that is wrong. The problem is the bully. And you have more power than you think. Tell someone. Document everything. Don't give up. Because bullies like Karen Mitchell only win if good people stay silent. The applause was thunderous. I sat there crying, overwhelmed with pride for this incredible human being I'd been blessed to raise. 5 years after her conviction, Karen Mitchell sent me a letter from prison. I almost didn't open it. I'd moved on with my life, focused on Sarah and her future. The last thing I wanted was to hear from the woman who tried to murder my daughter. But something made me open it. The letter was 3 pages long, handwritten in neat cursive. It started with excuses, the stress she'd been under, the pressure of managing the HOA, how no one appreciated her efforts to maintain the neighborhood standards. I almost threw it away right there. But then the tone changed. I dream about her screaming, Karen wrote. Your daughter. I dream about the sound she made when I put the tape over her mouth. I dream about her eyes, so wide and terrified. I dream about the box, about the darkness, about how she must have felt as I piled dirt on top of her. I tell myself I was just trying to teach a lesson. I tell myself I wasn't really going to leave her there long, that I would have dug her up after a few hours, that she would have learned to follow the rules. But I know that's a lie. I know I might have left her there to die. And the worst part is, in the moment, I convinced myself it was justified. She was violating the bylaws. You were violating the bylaws. Therefore, extreme measures were necessary. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm writing this because my therapist says I need to take accountability. So here it is, I was wrong. I was cruel. I was a monster. I almost killed an innocent child because I cared more about rules than people. Your daughter deserved better. You deserved better. The whole neighborhood deserved better. I destroyed lives because I needed to feel in control. Because I needed to feel important. Because I convinced myself that enforcing rules made me a good person, when really it just made me a tyrant. I hope your daughter is thriving. I hope she's forgotten me. I hope she never has to think about that night again. I will think about it every day for the rest of my life. The letter was signed simply, Karen Mitchell, inmate number 847592. I sat there for a long time, staring at those words. Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction that she was suffering. Part of me wanted to tear the letter up and forget about it. But mostly, I felt nothing. Karen Mitchell no longer had the power to affect my emotions. She was just a sad woman who destroyed her own life because she couldn't see people as anything other than rule breakers or rule followers. I never responded to the letter. But I didn't throw it away either. I filed it with all the other documents from that time, a reminder of what happens when cruelty and control go unchecked. Sarah is 17 now. She's applied to colleges, with plans to study social work and advocacy. She wants to work with disabled children and families, helping them navigate systems that aren't always designed with them in mind. She still has bad days. Anniversaries of the kidnapping are hard. Sometimes she has nightmares. But they're getting fewer and farther between. Last week, she came home from school excited. Daddy, guess what? I got invited to speak at a conference about disability rights. They want me to talk about overcoming adversity and fighting systemic discrimination. I smiled. That's amazing, baby. I'm so proud of you. I'm going to talk about Karen, Sarah said. About what she did, and about how we fought back. Because that's what people need to hear. They need to know that bullies can be beaten, that systems can be changed, that justice is possible. Just remember, I said gently. You're not defined by what happened to you. You're defined by what you choose to do after. I know, Sarah said. That's exactly what I'm going to tell them. She wheeled away to start working on her speech, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I thought about that terrible night 5 years ago. The fear. The rage. The moment I found Sarah in that box. I thought about Karen Mitchell, sitting in a prison cell, living with what she'd done. I thought about the neighborhood we'd left behind, now free from tyranny. And I thought about Sarah, my strong, brave, incredible daughter, who'd taken the worst experience of her life and turned it into a mission to help others. Karen Mitchell had tried to bury Sarah alive. But all she'd really done was bury herself. Sarah had risen from that dirt stronger than ever, a survivor who refused to be silent, who refused to let cruelty win. That's what real strength looks like. Not control. Not rules. Not power over others. It's getting back up after being knocked down. It's choosing kindness in a cruel world. It's using your pain to help others. Karen Mitchell thought she was teaching us a lesson that night. But the only lesson learned was this: cruelty may be powerful in the moment, but compassion, justice, and love are what endure. Sarah survived. Sarah thrived. And she would spend the rest of her life making sure no other child had to go through what she did. That was the real victory. That was the real justice. And that was the price Karen Mitchell would pay for the rest of her life, knowing that the child she tried to destroy had become a force for good in the world, while she rotted alone in a cell, haunted by her own cruelty. On the 5-year anniversary of that night, Sarah asked me to help her with a project. I want to create a memorial garden, she said. For other victims. People who've been bullied, harassed, people who felt powerless. We found a piece of land in a public park and got permission from the city. Over 3 months, volunteers helped us build it. We planted flowers that bloomed year-round. We installed benches where people could sit and reflect. In the center, we placed a stone marker with an inscription Sarah wrote. For everyone who has been told they don't belong. You belong. You matter. You are enough. The day we opened the garden, over 300 people came. Families Sarah had helped through her support group. Neighbors from our current community. Even a few people from Meadowbrook Estates who'd been victims of Karen's harassment. Officer Benton came too. He'd been promoted back to his original rank after years of exemplary service. He approached me hesitantly. Mr. Crawford, Agent Crawford, I just wanted to say again how sorry I am. I failed you and your daughter. I let personal relationships cloud my judgment. What happened to Sarah? His voice cracked. That never should have happened. I should have listened to you from the start. You're here now, I said simply. That counts for something. He nodded, then walked over to Sarah. I watched as he spoke to her, tears running down his face. Sarah listened, then reached out and took his hand. She said something I couldn't hear, but Benton nodded, wiping his eyes. Later, Sarah told me what she'd said, everyone makes mistakes. What matters is what you do after. That was my daughter. Even after everything, she chose forgiveness over bitterness. Compassion over revenge. As the sun set on that anniversary evening, I stood in the garden surrounded by people who turned their pain into purpose, and I thought about how far we'd come. Karen Mitchell had wanted to bury Sarah alive to maintain order in her perfect little neighborhood. Instead, Sarah had built a garden where anyone could come and feel safe, accepted, and valued. In the end, love and compassion won. They always do, if you fight hard enough. I looked at my daughter, now surrounded by the children from her support group, laughing and talking and planning their next project. She'd survived the darkness. She'd found her light. And she was sharing it with the world. That was the greatest victory of all. 3 months after the garden opening, I received an unexpected phone call from the prison warden. Agent Crawford, I'm calling about inmate Karen Mitchell. She's been asking to see your daughter. She says she has something important to tell her. My first instinct was to refuse immediately. Sarah didn't need to see that woman. But I told him I'd discuss it with Sarah and let him know. That evening at dinner, I brought it up carefully. Baby, Karen Mitchell wants to see you. You don't have to go. You don't owe her anything. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, pushing food around her plate. Finally, she looked up at me. I want to go. I need to see her one last time. Are you sure? After everything she did to you. That's exactly why, Daddy. I need her to see who I became. I need her to see that she didn't break me. 2 weeks later, we sat across from Karen Mitchell in the prison visiting room. She'd aged dramatically in 5 years. Her hair was completely gray, her face lined with deep wrinkles. But it was her eyes that shocked me most, they were empty, hollow. Sarah, Karen said, her voice barely a whisper. You're so grown up now. I'm 17, Sarah said calmly. I'm applying to colleges. I run a support group for disabled kids. I speak at conferences. I built a memorial garden for bullying victims. Karen's hands trembled. I read about your garden in the newspaper. It's beautiful. It is, Sarah agreed. It's a place where people can feel safe. Something your neighborhood never was. Karen flinched. I destroyed so many lives. Not just yours. My husband left me. My brother lost his career. But worst of all, I almost killed you. An innocent child. And for what? Because your wheelchair left marks on a sidewalk. You almost killed me because you valued control over humanity, Sarah said. Because you forgot that rules are supposed to serve people, not the other way around. Karen nodded, tears streaming down her face. I called you here to say I'm sorry. I know it doesn't change anything. I know it doesn't undo what I did. But I needed you to hear it. I am deeply, profoundly sorry for what I put you through. Sarah looked at her for a long moment. Then she said something that surprised even me. I forgive you. Karen's eyes widened. What? I forgive you, Sarah repeated. Not for you. For me. Because carrying hatred is exhausting, and I have better things to do with my energy. I'm going to change the world, Karen. I'm going to help kids like me feel safe and valued. And your cruelty is what gave me that mission. So in a twisted way, you made me who I am today. Sarah wheeled herself closer to the glass partition. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean what you did was okay. It means I'm choosing not to let you have any more power over my life. You're just a sad woman who made terrible choices. And I'm moving forward without you. We left the prison that day, and Sarah never looked back. She'd faced her demon and emerged victorious. Karen Mitchell died in prison 2 years later from a heart attack. I didn't tell Sarah immediately. When I finally did, she simply nodded and said, I hope she found peace. That's who my daughter is. Someone who survived hell and chose compassion anyway. Today, Sarah is in her second year of college, studying social work. Her support group has expanded to 10 cities. Her memorial garden inspired 3 more across the state. She's written a book about her experience that's being published next year. Sometimes I watch her speaking at events, advocating for disabled rights, helping other families navigate difficult systems, and I'm overwhelmed with pride and love. The little girl who was buried alive at 12 is now a powerful voice for change at 19. Karen Mitchell tried to silence Sarah by burying her in darkness. Instead, Sarah became a light that shines for thousands. And that's the real ending to this story. Not revenge. Not hatred. But a young woman who took her trauma and transformed it into purpose, who chose healing over bitterness, who proved that kindness and strength can coexist. Karen Mitchell's legacy is a prison cell and regret. Sarah's legacy is hope, change, and endless possibility. In the end, love won. It always does.